morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us, leaders, peers, fellow TLDP members, and friends. I'm Chandra Sponsler. I'm the branch manager for Family Support Services under the mighty J1. My team and I have the pleasure of discussing resilient readiness with you this morning. So to start off, let's find out how many of you are basically ready and resilient enough to join us on this journey. So by a show of hands, over about this last 16 hours, how many of y'all have exercised? Fantastic, grow the green, right? And how many of y'all had a healthy and well-balanced meal? Awesome. And finally, how many of you had a good night's sleep and are feeling pretty rested? All right, not quite as many. Yeah, me too. I actually had a recurring nightmare that I was late, basically in PJs, and forgot everything I'm supposed to say. Just kidding. Obviously, I'm here, I'm dressed appropriately, and I am ready to go. So our wicked problem specifically is always ready, always there. America's National Guard motto. But our National Guard soldiers, service airmen, and families face unique challenges such as civilian employment, reemployment, separation, return, finances, and combat stress, among many others. So how do we train and equip our citizen soldiers and airmen to be ready to fight America's wars, secure the homeland, and build partnerships at the local, federal, state, and international levels? Good question. Let's start by defining resiliency. I know we've talked about it a lot, so can someone in the audience give me your basic idea of what resiliency is? Anybody?
To bounce back.
Yeah, great, sir. The simplest definition of resiliency is the ability to grow and thrive in the face of challenges and to bounce back from adversity. We want to be the ball, not the egg. We want to bounce, not crack. So I'm glad to know that so many of you are on the right track to taking care of yourself, because that definitely is a part of resiliency. But it's not always that easy, is it? We've got a lot of competing priorities. We've got jobs, we've got a lot of work to do, we have families and friends to support and maintain, and of course, life happens. Cars break down, we need to get to work, we need to repair them, kids get sick, the bosses throw last-minute suspenses at us, changes to our projects that we weren't anticipating. And when all those things start stacking up and we don't necessarily feel like we're keeping up, it can be kind of easy, if we're not meeting our own self-expectations, to start kind of a negative thought process. Take the following, for example. A few weeks ago, I hosted the Commander's Ready and Resilient Council with a tag. During that meeting, he asked that I set up a meeting with the CG to back brief her on some of the trends and initiatives that we spoke of. Sir, I apologize. I have yet to do that. Enter negative self-thoughts. I am failing the boss. I'm no good at my job. As far as being no good, my house has cracks because I didn't water my foundation this summer when it got hot. I'm a terrible homeowner. My fiance and I had an argument a few weeks ago. I wonder if we're even going to get married. Only one of my bridesmaids has told me that she ordered her dress. I wonder if the rest of them secretly hate it and just told me they like it. And Kristen hasn't texted me back. I wonder if she's mad at me, if she still wants to be my bridesmaid, or even my friend. And on and on and on you can go down this seriously bad path of negative thought. Or I can stop. Use put it in perspective and real-time resilience, realize what I'm doing, and spin those thoughts around into something more positive, more productive, so that I can get through life a little bit better. Take 2. I'm good at my job. The boss understands that I've got other responsibilities I need to do. He forgives me for going on vacation, and he trusts that I will meet his intent. Right, boss?
Yeah.
Winning! I'm also pretty good at DIY. So I'll fix those cracks. They're not that bad, but I will get better at taking care of my house in the future. My fiance and I, we've had arguments about way more important things than the one we just went through, and we've come out stronger because of it. I'm sure we'll be fine. My bridesmaids have been my friends for a really long time. They would have been honest with me if they hated the dress, and it is really cute. And finally, Kristen and I have been friends for like 20 years. We love. She's got 2 small kids and a new thriving business. She's just really busy. But I should probably give her a call to check in, right? So just as easy as it was for me to go down that negative thought pattern, I recognized what I was doing, used a couple of simple resiliency skills, and was able to make myself have more positive, productive thoughts so that I can perform a little bit better. Sorry. On that, I'm going to introduce Joyner's theory of suicide. He states that there's 3 components that lead to suicidal tendencies. The first is thwarted belongingness, feeling alone, isolated, and a general lack of social connection. We all know that social media does not replace actual physical human interaction, right? Right. The second is personal burdensomeness, perceived burdensomeness. Things like when you say, they'd be better off without me. We'll stop you there. I promise you they won't. The third is capability for suicide, having the actual means along with reduced barriers to actually commit suicide. On that, I'll caveat that suicide prevention and resiliency are by no means the same thing, but they are connected, as folks that tend to have higher resiliency have a better outlook on life and tend to get through challenges in a better way. So what are we doing about resiliency? Well, the Army and Air Force both have resiliency programs built to enhance and build those skills within our service members. The Army National Guard has the comprehensive Soldier Family and Fitness Program with 5 dimensions of resiliency, which are physical, emotional, spiritual, social, and family. The Air Force has a similar program, Comprehensive Airman Fitness Program, built on 4 domains of physical, mental, social, and family. That's a lot of domains and dimensions that don't necessarily have the same words. So our first recommendation is to simplify all that into a simple triad based on 3 spheres of influence of self, leader, and team. They touch on all the dimensions of both the Army and Air Force. We did the spheres to show that all of those are interconnected. Self hits on physical, behavioral, and spiritual as it relates to how we think, believe, and how well we take care of ourselves. Leader hits on physical as well as social, as it deals with unit cohesion, unit climate, job satisfaction, dissatisfaction. And finally, team hits on social, family, behavioral, and spiritual. How we think, feel, and interact with the folks around us, our communities in which we live and serve. So what's the issue? Well, in the self realm, about 26% of our Army National Guard are not medically ready. We heard from a previous group that 23% are flagged for APFT. Alternatively, about 10% of our Air Guard are not passing their PT tests. 19% of our force has financial issues. We all know that if we don't have savings to fall back on when the car needs repair, the kids need braces, or a spouse loses a job, it can create a financial burden that takes a really long time to climb out of. And finally, about 41% of suicides across our force have had a current or past mental health diagnosis. In terms of leader, about 20% of our entire force does not trust leadership. Poor unit climate leads to poor unit cohesion and a host of other problems, but I'll let Lobo talk about that later. Similarly, about 23% of the Army and 15% of the Air have high stress due to high job demand requirements. I've heard some of our leaders talk about how we place additional tasks on the high performers. Maybe we're leading them towards burnout. In the realm of team, about 40% of all of our suicides had recently experienced family or relationship issues. This can include loss of a significant relationship, whether due to divorce or possibly even loss of a close family member or friend. About 10% of our Army National Guard is the divorce rate for about the past 2 years. About 30% of our force is not religious. Research has shown that practicing religion, any religion at all, helps build a tightly knit social group. It helps us understand morality and a sense of purpose, as well as an opportunity for self-reflection and self-improvement. Those sound a lot like benefits that you get from joining military service as well, if you ask me. And finally, about 10% of our force feel lonely and that they have no one to turn to. 8% of the Army and 23% of the Air Guard feel that there's a lack of unit cohesion. Support systems are paramount to building barriers to suicidality. I'd like to share a personal story on that. About a year and a half ago, the Saturday after Mother's Day to be exact, I came home after spending the night with my boyfriend at the time, and to find my mom, who lived with me, on the floor in our entryway, not breathing. She had COPD, the electricity on the block had gone out, so her oxygen machine had stopped working, and she passed out trying to connect to her secondary machine. I called 911. I did the chest compressions like the operator told me to until they got there. But there was nothing that EMS could do. She'd been without oxygen for too long, so she died that day, very unexpectedly. And needless to say, after dealing with the police and funeral homes all day, I was in no mood to see my friends. But the next day, when I did allow them to come over and check on me, comfort me, I think I mentioned something about not wanting to be here anymore. One of my friends, Kristen specifically, picked up on that real quick and told me to get my butt to talk to somebody so that I could talk about my grief and my situation and the loss of my mom in a more appropriate manner than hurting myself. So I did. I talked to Tracy Ward, one of our local counselors, some of you probably know, and she helped me cry, which I hadn't been doing a lot of. I think I was still in shock, and I had this need to feel strong for everyone around me. But I didn't talk to her enough, because over the next couple of months, there were a lot of times that I thought really hard about taking a hard left off the Mopac Bridge or even using my boyfriend's gun. Luckily for me, I've got a fantastic support system, friends that checked on me regularly, great coworkers, leaders, family that constantly were keeping in contact with me, reaching out to me, letting me know that I was important to them and that I mattered. This was huge for me because my mom had always been my person and my personal cheerleader. And when I lost her, I thought I had lost that. So because of my support system and time, the feelings of depression and grief and guilt didn't go away, but they became less prevalent and less focused in the front of my mind. Another thing I do is to remind myself of some of the things that I would have missed out on had I made that irreversible choice last year. Families and friends' birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, trips I've gone on, got to go to Bogota, Colombia, concerts I've been to, going to ACL this weekend, and it's a 4-day weekend, awesome. And you might have picked up on the fact that I'm getting married next year. Those are all really great things that I would have missed out on. Hunt the Good Stuff is just one of many resilience skills, and probably the simplest for me to use, though I know I could improve. On that, the good news is resiliency can be grown and enhanced through effort and practice. I'm going to let Scott take over and talk about what we can do on the self realm to talk about improving resiliency.
Thank you, Chandra. My name is Scott Waddell. I'm from the 136th Airlift Wing up in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm excited to be a part of the TLDP this last year, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to our conversations today. I want to start out with a quote. Eric Greitner, a former Navy SEAL, said, "Resiliency isn't just in your mind, it's in your body too. We are all physical beings. Sleep matters, exercise matters, what you eat matters. You're happier if you're healthier. You will be more resilient if you are better rested, and your physical strength is part of your mental strength." I'm going to talk about the self-domain, the self-sphere today of our triad that we introduced that Chandra spoke about. I'm going to touch on how the self-sphere interacts with each of the domains of the triad. I'm going to talk about some of the benchmarks that we can use as individuals to make ourselves more resilient. They're already available. And I'm going to make some recommendations to the Texas Military Department that we can easily implement to make all of our personnel a little bit more resilient. The great part about resiliency is it can be learned. We can teach people to be more resilient. We can become more resilient ourselves. And a person who's more resilient is a better worker, a better soldier, a better airman, and a better member of the Texas Military Department. In the physical domain, The goal is to understand the connection between your physical strength and your mental strength, to understand how those two things relate together and how to make yourself better. Some things that we can do in the physical domain that helps us is to be more nutritious and eat better meals and to understand what we're eating. Maybe read the label on the back of that can to really understand the ingredients in what we're eating and what we're putting into our bodies. Supplements can be an important part of the physical domain as well, to make sure that we get the right vitamins that we need, to make sure that we're putting the right nutrients into our bodies. Also, on a side note, is reading the back of those labels as well to make sure that some of those red flag ingredients aren't on those labels that we don't want in our bodies and that might not be so good for us. And then the physical domain. When you talk about physical fitness or physical fitness, people think, well, I'm trying to pass my fitness test and trying to stay healthy, but it's more than just that. It's making sure you stay hydrated, that make sure you have enough water intake to keep your body hydrated, making sure that you take enough break between your workouts so that your body has a time to recoup and to recover. And also, one thing that a lot of us neglect is enough sleep. We need to make sure we're getting enough sleep so our body gets the rest that it needs so that we can be more attentive and more alert. In the self and family domain, there's a lot of things that we can learn to make ourselves more resilient and to build better relationships. Some of those things include interpersonal problem-solving skills so that we can relate to people, so that we can relate to one another, to better understand one another. Develop better listening skills or good listening skills so that we can understand what people are saying. To really hear what they're saying so that we can pick up on things that people are saying and help them in other ways. In the behavior and spiritual domain, there's a lot of things that we also do to help ourselves individually. We can balance our thinking, making sure that we're not thinning ourselves down that spiral that Chandra spoke about early in her presentation. Also, we can check our playbook to make sure our goals are right on line, to make sure our goals are set, to make sure that we're doing the right things to achieve our next goal. And also spiritual strength, to develop spiritual strength, to make sure that our beliefs, that our purpose, that our values are in line with the things that we're doing and that we're accomplishing those things and making ourselves more resilient. One thing in the behavior and spiritual domain that we all need to take a look at is when to ask for help. We know there's resources as members of the Texas Military Department available for us, the Director of Psychological Health, the Chaplains Department, but we need to make sure that when we are willing to ask for those help when we need it, and make sure we don't build up stigmas or negative connotations behind those things and seeking help when we really need it. The one RAND survey recently done had a study, and one of the quotes from the RAND study is, "The clinic building themselves aren't scary, but add the word mental health, and most people will avoid them like they contain tigers on the loose. Some service members might have false impressions of the mental health clinic as a dark hole where clearances are lost and careers are ruined." A colleague of mine recently told me a story that he had to refer an airman downtown to a hospital for suicidal ideations. When the airman got to the hospital, he told them what was going on. They made him strip to his underwear, put on a hospital gown, stuck him in a room with no windows, no photographs, no furniture. He was sitting there in a chair, waited 2 hours for a healthcare professional to come back to see him. Obviously, this did not help his stigma of what mental health can do. So we need to do benchmarks. We need to use benchmarks that we already have learned to help signify some of these things. One of those benchmarks is maybe send an airman or a soldier as a buddy with that person to go downtown to be able to relieve some stress, to just talk, to have somebody else there to lean on a little bit, to be a good soldier, to be a good airman. Some other benchmarks that we can use already to help ourselves better is doing self-assessments of our stress, to know what those stressors are in our life and how they're affecting us, to know what those stressors are in our family, in our work environment, to make sure that we're taking care of those things. Also, the National Guard Bureau has created a prevention program. Their mission statement is to create a culture within the National Guard that seeking help isn't a sign of weakness, but is a sign of strength. There's a number of websites that we can use, including their prevention program website and several TMD websites that have tools that we can use ourselves to help ourselves be more resilient. Some of these tools include ways to deal with separation when we're deployed, or ways our spouse can deal with separation when we're deployed. One nice feature of the ANG prevention website is they have Sesame Streets for military. These are little cartoons that military families can show for their kids to help them deal with situations that families go through as a military member. Like, maybe why am I having to move schools and move to a different place? Or why is my dad or mom deployed and gone for a long time? But it helps them deal with things on their level and how to understand things that they're going through. Some other benchmarks that are available for us already set in place. On the fitness side is CrossFit programs across the state of Texas, master fitness trainers. The Texas Military Department has already implemented the Senior Enlisted Leadership Program, where they have a 2-week boot camp for individuals that have a hard time passing their fitness test. Other benchmarks such as strong bonds programs, where we have family strong bonds or single strong bonds, where they come together and build one another up and connect together with one another. There's YMCA family resilience camps, and there's also financial lunch and learns. A few recommendations that our group would like to recommend to the Texas Military Department to help everybody with resiliency, of which would be very easy to implement, is fireproofing. We could use fireproofing in the recruiting sustainment program and enlisted professional development by inviting subject matter experts such as financial advisors to come in, talk about TSP, talk about investing, talk about budgeting and how to make a family budget, talk about writing resumes and interviewing skills and job seeking opportunities. Do walkabouts with the DPH and the chaplain's office so that the first time you see them isn't when you're sitting in front of them, but be able to connect with them, build relations with them, put a face with the name. Another thing that we would like to introduce is something we're going to call #LivingProof, where we have actual Texas Military Department members do 2-minute videos to put on our website, like Chandra's story, so that people can connect with it, to realize that they're not the only person who's ever gone through this situation or has gone through this hard time. But these little #LivingProof would be witnesses that we know and recognize around the Texas Military Department. I think it's important for us to educate our members that surveys and questionnaires aren't necessarily a bad thing and aren't going to end their career because they sought mental health. All of us use eQuibs to do our security clearance briefings. eQuibs has taken a great step forward in doing this already. Some of the questionnaires on the eQuibs already have disclaimers such as mental health treatment and counseling in and of itself is not a reason to revoke or deny eligibility for access to classified information or for holding a sensitive position. But we need to make sure that our personnel realize that when they're answering climate surveys and when they're answering questionnaires at the hospital, that is not necessarily just because they went to see the director of psychological health going to have a negative impact on their career. One of the last items that we would like to recommend to the Texas Military Department is the Joel app. The Joel app is an app that people can put on their smartphone that tracks things such as exercise, tracks things they've eaten, tracks their sleep, and there's ways to improve these items along the way. The Joel app has been used in industry already. Several companies who have used the Joel app have seen great improvement. Their personnel have increased a sense of purpose from 37% to 63% in just 30 days. Another thing that they have seen an increase is a sync in work life and personal life. They've seen alignments in these things from 15 to 32% in just 30 days. The Texas Military Department has already talked about doing a pilot testing in FY19 of the Joel app. In closing, the perceived burden that individuals feel must be lifted. We must end up with guardsmen who are educated, help-seeking, and self-aware. I wanted to relate to you a quick story from Tech Sergeant Terrence Williams. Tech Sergeant Terrence Williams recently did an interview with the Air Force Times in an article entitled "A Journey of Resiliency, Healing the Wounds That Can't Be Seen." Terrence Williams wants us all to realize that help is there. He wishes that he would have gotten help earlier, not so late in the game. We can't always do things on our own, he says. He wishes he would have listened to his wife a long time ago, who was always encouraging him to go get help, but he chose not to. Tech Sergeant Williams encourages us all to listen to the signs that tell us that we might have an issue before it's too late. If you have any doubts in your mind that you might need to seek professional help from a medical professional, do it now before it is too late. Our next sphere is the leadership sphere, and my colleague Lobo is going to talk to you about that.
Thanks, Scott. I'd like to start with a quote on resiliency from Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Wright. He goes on to state, "What we really need is more engaged leadership at the unit level. Supervisors who are more engaged and care about their people can really assist us more than any program or process." I think a leader can have a significant effect on the resiliency or the organization. The main things I want to focus on today is know your people, shape the culture of your organization, and lastly, maintain good order and discipline. So I'd like to go back to number one, which is know your people. So the number one priority in the TAG's philosophy paper is to put people first. He goes on to state, know your people. Prove by your actions that our people are our top priority. Every soldier, airman, and civilian should feel like they are a valued service member. So knowing your people as a leader involves getting out from behind your desk. Going out and talk to the individuals and listening to what they have to say. Ask them questions. Ask them how their day is going. But also figure out what their hopes are, what their aspirations are, some of the challenges that they face, and figure out how you could help them with those challenges. And one of the things this does is it increases your approachability as a leader. So 19% of the deaths by suicide told someone about it beforehand. So you'd like to hear about those problems from those individuals, hopefully before it gets to that point, all right? But by increasing your approachability, it increases that likelihood. The other thing is, by getting out and knowing your people, you're more able to see warning signs and see signs such as behavior changes or someone that's under a lot of stress, all right? And once you see those, hopefully you could ask them those questions in order to help them out in a better way. In Klamath Falls, approximately about 2 years ago, Klamath Falls is an F-15 training unit. One of the students was really struggling in the course. And a lot of times when students are struggling, they come together as a class and really start to gel. But this student kind of distanced himself away from the class. And then a couple days later, they found him in the wilderness after he had committed suicide. So these are kind of the things that we'd like to see those stressors on our people and see it before it gets to that point and see where we could help. 40% of the suicides, one of the main, or the second most risk factor of suicide, or one of the second leading factors in a suicide. The number one is mental disorder, but number two is a relationship problem. So as a leader, being able to have that approachability where people come to you with their problems, but also seeing signs that someone's under stress and say, hey, how's it going? How's your family doing? And being able to ask those questions could really help us increase the resiliency of our squadron itself. The next thing I want to talk to you is about shaping the culture of our organization. So what we're really trying to get after is a cohesive unit that has a purpose, has a clear vision, open communication, and trust in an organization. One of the recent quotes from the Air Force website in Resiliency in Numbers says, leaders can also help build social resiliency within their command by fostering a sense of camaraderie, providing a clear understanding of the mission, and encouraging unit cohesion. This goes exactly to what we were talking about, what Chandra was talking about on Joyner's theory of suicide. One of the things that Joyner talked about was that feeling of loneliness, or not, that they didn't belong. We'll try to promote that culture of inclusion and cohesion in your squadron. Will specifically help address that factor. One of the most cohesive units I've ever been a part of was in Kunsan as a Panton. Pantons? No. Okay. But one of the things that they did, they were kind of a remote location, so they worked hard together, they played hard together, they worked out together, they even had a band. All these things led to very tight cohesion. Now we have some challenges in the Guard, and we're citizen soldiers, so you don't see or don't get as much of a repetition with that individual as you would at Kunsan, because they have another job possibly, and you don't see them as much. But also, Guard individuals tend to get more entrenched in their local community. That's a good thing. That provides cohesion, but it might draw away from cohesion that they might have elsewhere. Now, the gunfighters, which is the 149th Fighter Wing down in San Antonio, I think also have good unit cohesion. So some of the things that they do in order to promote cohesion in their unit is they do bent pistols, where we go tell stories on each other's. They also have hail farewells that they do twice a year. They have a graduation for their students where we all get dressed up and go out on the town. And they have a Christmas party. So all these things are designed to help increase the cohesion of the unit. The other responsibility of the leader, and kind of the other thing on Joyner's theory on suicide, was that perceived burdenness. So the best way to counter that is with a sense of purpose. So leaders providing that vision and goal, talking to your individuals and telling them how they fit into the organization and why what they do is important is the best way to kind of counter that one also. And then lastly, as a role model, be a role model for your organization so you can kind of promote that culture that you want to foster. So one of the things from St. Francis, what he said was, teach the gospel every day, and if you must, use words. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get after about being a role model. So for example, if you don't think your unit is paying enough attention to physical fitness, let them see you working out during the day. Let them see you coming back from a run in the morning, or better yet, invite them to go work out with you. Same thing if you think that the squadron of the culture is lacking that spiritual connection or even access to that mental health, and you're trying to break down barriers. Do what Scott was talking about, where you're going or teaming up with your DPH or your MRT, teaming up with your chaplain, going on walkabouts, letting individuals see you talking to them to kind of break down those barriers. Introduce them to people in your squadron. Have them join on some of those social functions that your squadron might have. The next thing I want to talk about is maintaining good order and discipline in the squadron. So Dr. Corso did a study where he went and interviewed multiple Air National Guard units, and he presented the results of his study at the Senior Leadership Conference that we had out back in Milwaukee this year. So there's two kind of things that I want to key in on. What he saw was some of the telltale signs, or one of the things that are more telltale in the individuals that commit suicide. And one of those essentially said two things: the individual's performance relative to their peers, and then the other thing was whether the unit is meeting that individual's expectations. So one of the things as a leader, we should really promote mentorship and feedback in the squadron. So what that does is it interacts with the individuals, it figures out what their expectations are, one, and it also communicates your expectations to them. It gives them a clear path on how they can improve by providing them that feedback. And it sets that way for them to continue to grow in your organization. And you may even find out in those mentoring sessions that there is another place for them within your unit where they could better excel. Also, climate surveys. So one of the things that we talked about was whether the unit is meeting your expectations. So the climate survey, there's specific questions in there that are slated towards meeting expectations. So when you're looking at those things as leaders, really key in on those, and if you see a problem there, really try to dig to that root cause and use that feedback in order to improve the climate of your unit. And then the last thing is to maintain good order. So I've seen it on multiple locations where individuals in the unit, the morale really decreases because they think that the commander is playing favorites, or maybe giving awards to someone that they don't think deserves it, or punishing or not punishing someone as much as what they think is fitting the crime. So obviously as leaders, our role there is just to make sure that we're maintaining the standards and that we're standardizing how we treat the other individuals in the unit, and make sure that we're not playing favorites or favoring one person over another. So how do we improve as leaders? How do we make more resilient leaders? I think the first step is education. So at all the commander courses that we provide, or any type of leadership course, make sure we're adding that bit on resilient leadership into those courses, whether it's the pre-command course in the Army, or the squadron commander course in the Air National Guard, or even on the executive or the quarterly executive council. The other thing that we're also doing is educating our squadrons as leaders. So the recent initiative with the Stand Up For initiative, what that is designed to do is introduce those videos that Chandra talked about earlier and Scott talked about, and showing those at different quarterly emphasis items inside the squadron to make our squadron or our organization more resilient. The other thing is feedback. So one of the ways to get better is obviously through feedback. We already talked about how mentoring can provide us the feedback we're looking for. We talked about how climate surveys can provide us with the mentoring that we're looking for, or the feedback that we're looking for. But also use those DPHs, the MRTs, and also the chaplain in order to give us a check on how is the climate of our organization. Do they see any trouble areas? How can we improve? Another initiative that's currently ongoing, it's pre-decisional, that came out this year, was called a SABE, which is a Suicide Analysis Board. So this is similar to a safety investigation board done for aircraft incidences, but they get a team of individuals together of subject matter experts that go out to where a suicide occurred, and then they make sure that they really getting to the root cause of why this suicide occurred, and see what we could do better, and really get the trend data that we can make to improve. So we need a team with that effort, and make sure we're complementing those teams, especially if it's occurring in Texas, to make sure that we're getting to those root causes and getting the trend data that we need. So all these things are designed to give us more resilient leaders in the Texas Military Department. All right, what we're looking for is getting to know our people better, shaping the culture of our organization, and maintaining good order and discipline and setting those expectations. So next, I'd like to hand it over to Kareem to talk to you more about team.
Hello, good morning. I'm Kareem Branford. I'm the Deputy J5 Joint Force Headquarters.
Cool.
So I'll ask you all a question. Raise your hands. Who believes there's no I in team? A few of you? I would submit to you that there is an I in team. So John J. Murphy and Michael McMillan, in their book, The I in Team, state, no I's, no team, no team, no teamwork. So what I'm going to go over here is the final sphere of our triad, the team, and show you why it's important for the overall resilient triad. What I'll go over first are some of the current programs that we have that go across these domains, and then I'll address 3 recommendations that we have for the agency. The first recommendation will be a TMD resiliency dashboard. The second recommendation will be a spiritual volunteer team for the agency, and the final recommendation is what we're calling #TMD Together. So looking at the current programs that we have within the domain. So in the social and family domain, on the air side, we have the Key Spouses programs, and on the Army side, we have our family readiness groups. On the social side, we have our sponsorship programs at the unit level. In discussion with several leaders and commanders across the formation, there are varying degrees of success with some of these various programs. We then look at behavioral and the spiritual domain. On the air side, we have 3 directors of psychological health for the air wings. That's 1 per air wing. On the Army side, we have 9 + 1 TMD counselors. That's a total of 13 individuals that help us with our behavioral side of the domains. 13 for a formation of 24,000 spanning hundreds of miles. That is a lot for them to do. On the spiritual side, who's part of the 136 Airlift Wing? And anyone ever been in the unit? A few of you. So what they found on their last deployment is they instituted a chaplain volunteer program. So this program was based on 4 pillars. The first pillar was grow. That was the individuals within your formation that are they're extroverts. They like to communicate, they talk to the peers, subordinates, leaders, who have you. Your knowledge pillar are those who are the subject matter experts in their respective religious documents, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, what have you. The know team then transitioned this to the share team. Your share team are those who take the word from the know team and spread it throughout the community. And then finally you have your serve team. They're the doers, the one that's get the work done, that helps with the advertising of the share team. So looking at that. The final domain that we'll look at, and everyone's familiar, we have the physical. So we have things like height and weight program, and we have remedial PT. Again, speaking with company commanders, battalion commanders within this organization, same varying degrees of success. A lot of it is dependent on that I within the team for how successful those individuals are with getting out of those programs and being relevant and ready for the force. So we talked about thwarted belongingness within the organization. So in order to have inclusion, what we're submitting to you is that we are larger than a unit company. We are larger than an air wing. We are larger than Air, Army, State Guard, and Civilian. We are TMD. So moving forward, our recommendations. I talked to you a little bit about the reporting mechanisms we have within the agency. On the air side, we have the community action boards. On the Army side, we have the Commanders Ready and Resiliency Council. These are two separate mechanisms which are great for the senior leadership to get situational awareness on where we stand. However, they're slightly lacking. So first recommendation is creating an overarching agency TMD resiliency dashboard that would be chaired by the Joint Force Headquarters, Family Support Services, that looks at data from across the formation, not just in the behavioral, but looking at your physical, family, social, spiritual domains, and then applying some of those investigative teams that Lobo talked about to truly get to the root causes of what are causing some of these things. Why are we discharging individuals who can't pass their PT test? Getting to the left of a suicidal event. That's our first recommendation. Our second recommendation, taking the model of 136 Airlift Wing. After they redeployed from their deployment in the CENTCOM AOR, 136 Airlift Wing implemented that same chaplaincy program here in Texas. After Hurricane Harvey, they went down to the coast and helped spiritually with some of those service members who were displaced through the flooding and were coping with the loss of property in their homes. So what we're saying is that grow, know, share, and serve should be implemented here. In the CENTCOM AOR, once they implemented that team, what they saw was suicides went from 2 to 0, ideation and attempts went from 11 to 2, and their volunteer team grew from 13 to 130 in about a 120-day time frame. When you look at how vast Texas is, our chaplains and chaplains teams cannot do it alone. Our DPHs and our TMD counselors are 13, so we have to have another team that is able to help and assist them across this vast state. And it's not to where these teams would be just within your units. They would be regionally aligned to where there'd be a spiritual team, for example, in the Austin area that could help supplement what division or the Joint Force Headquarters does. Second recommendation. Our final recommendation to the team is the cornerstone of what we're recommending, and that is hashtag TMD Together. This is now broken into two portions. The first is a TMD app networking. What this is essentially, who's from Pflugerville Friends, PF Friends? Anyone lives in Pflugerville? Really, not many of you. So a few of you live in Pflugerville. So say Ms. Lopez and I enjoy going running. This is a mechanism that says that we both live in Pflugerville, we both like to run. I'm Army, she's a civilian, but we can still network outside of our respective units and get to know each other because, again, we are TMD. So what this program would do would network regionally so that we're not just relying on our units, not just relying on Army, Air, State Guard, civilians, so that we can communicate and build a team of teams so that we can help better identify when those individuals are going through a struggle, as Chandra talked about. Another part of the app, we can add a competition portion to where I can say, as an individual, I ran X number of miles today, and I can compete against my peers. Pflugerville can compete against Round Rock against Dallas, and so on, also making it a competition between units assigned. The second part of hashtag TMD Together is hashtag Living Proof. Chandra is a clear-cut case of hashtag Living Proof. It is finding those individuals within our formation who have gone through a crucible and come out on the other side. We are not alone. Everyone goes through a struggle. I am hashtag Living Proof when it comes to the social and family domain. I have a 7-year-old daughter, been diagnosed on the autism spectrum for 5 years, nonverbal, low-functioning autism. That is a huge stress on me on the family side as well as the social side. Having members within our formation tell their stories so that others know that they are not going it alone is important to building this team. So I'd like to leave you with a quote on team. So to achieve interdependence requires courage and humility. Independence, which is the self, can affect change. However, to truly achieve interdependence, which is a team, you once you achieve interdependence, you have the birth of transformation, and it's that transformation that we're looking for within the agency. So again, to recoup our recommendations overall, the first thing we're saying is between the domains and the dimensions, we have to have one standard for TMD. That's physical, our family and social, and then finally our behavioral and our spiritual. Within that, we have 3 spheres. The first sphere addresses people first. People are the most important thing we have here in TMD. We must address that through things like the Joule app and whatnot. Second area is the leaders. The leaders must make sure that we have a relevant and ready force in order to respond to whatever the president or the governor requests of us. Finally, we have team. Team is important to make sure that we can effectively communicate and partner, not just within our units, but across the agency as a whole, through things like #TMDTogether. So the reason why you see a lot of things up on these recommendations is that we understand that every individual out here is a little bit different. So what works for me may not work for you. That's why we are looking to cast a wide net, supplementing some of the existing programs in order to help and assist any of those individuals within our formation that are currently struggling. So with that, we'll now transition to our open discussion. I'd like to invite the rest of my team up here for any questions.